Hello everyone, my name is Lance090 and welcome to this quick tutorial video for Kerbal Space Program. We're just going to cover some basic launch and return mechanics as well as just ship design overall. I'm going to explain them simply. I'm not really going to dig into the deep details, the mechanics of the game and the real physics of real life. We're just going to kind of fly by the seat of our pants just using some basic concepts. This is basically done as a response video to Northernlion's recent Kerbal Space Program series. He's been having some trouble, and I think this might be some useful advice that won't take too long to go over. So, I'll grab our command pod, and already, does understand quite a few of the concepts I've noticed. I'm not really going to go over everything. Our command pod, it'll give us some basic control for our vessel, and we have a parachute. Number of parachutes you might need will depend on how fast you're coming back in, and that'll usually depend on like how far you're going out and then returning to Kerbin. But we're not going to bother with that right now. Usually, just if you're only bringing the command pod back, this is enough. But you might want to add a couple of drogue chutes if you think things are going to get a little hotter. It can never really hurt to have the drogue chutes. So, what we'll want is the coupler, or just the pod. Keep the pod isolated so we can separate it from everything else. We actually don't need a heat shield on the pod necessarily. That's another thing that can't really hurt too much. These heat shields are pretty heavy though, so if you can't avoid putting them on, you might want to. The basic command pod here actually has its own built-in heat shield. It doesn't really show you any info about it, but it is there, and it does a decent job on its own, so you might not need the extra weight of a heat shield, but it will make you safer regardless. So we'll grab some fuel. I'll go with 3 of these slightly larger than the smallest fuel tank. And I will grab this swivel liquid fuel engine. Oh wait, it's actually a little heavier. That must be new. I think it used to be lighter. So our command pod, since this is a very small ship, it doesn't need too much help with control. This swivel engine gives you more control because it has this vectoring, which will give you more control when the engine is firing. But since this pod is actually pretty strong on its own, I think we're just going to use this lighter engine. And I'll put another decoupler in. And then I will stick this big ol' solid fuel rocket booster down there. Let's see, what else do we need here? We need some science. We'll put on a pair of mystery goo containment units. Now, something to keep in mind with some of these other small science parts we have here. Well, pretty much we only have 2 right now for myself. This thermometer and barometer. Oh, I didn't actually mean to put 2 down. I don't need to double up on these things. Oh geez, I don't want that many either. Let's grab 1 of each, toss them on there. These ones that say they're have a mass of 0.005 tons, they'll all be these little tiny pieces. They don't have any physics. So like you could put them anywhere and it's not going to affect the center of mass of your ship, and you're not going to spiral out of control because you put them somewhere strange. They don't render the physics on these small parts. I do believe they do on these bigger ones. We also have a larger science module. I'm not going to worry about that for this run, though. And last thing we should check here with our craft. This is still a very basic spacecraft. I'm trying to just get to orbit with this. Since this is a solid fuel rocket booster, we need to change its thrust limiter. Because right now, this is going to fire at 100% thrust, and then we're not going to be able to stop it or slow it down or anything. And that's going to be way too much. I can already assume that much. I'm going to bring it down to like 60. What this will do is it'll use less thrust, which will make the fuel last longer. And the reason you don't want to go too fast at the start is when you're on the surface of the planet, the atmospheric pressure is a lot higher, so you are fighting against the force of the pressure. You want to go slower in the lower atmosphere and then faster as you ascend, is basically the gist of it. Thing is actually probably not gonna we're probably not gonna have very much control over it here because we don't have very many wing options yet. We just have these basic fins. So these fins, another thing we should clarify, these fins actually don't provide any control over your spacecraft. What they do is they help keep it in line of where it's going. So wherever the direction of thrust is taking you, this will kind of help lock it into place. But they do help a little bit. But at the same time, they can come back to bite you a little bit. Because it could get you locked into a direction you don't want to be pointing. But the last thing we should check before we launch any spacecraft is our staging. So we want the things that are going to go off first down at the bottom, and the things that are going to go off last up at the top. So we have our solid rocket booster, then we have the decoupler to separate it, we have the engine for our liquid fuel stage, and the decoupler to separate that, and then we have our parachute. Parachute should always be in the last slot, of no matter where it is or what it is. Always be last. Usually your SRBs are only going to be used at the start, so they're almost always going to be first in any situation. But that could possibly change, but that'll usually be the case. The only thing we need to change here with the spacecraft is to move this decoupler onto the same stage as this engine. So that way, when this runs out of fuel, we will decouple it and turn the next engine on at the same time. And I'll just differentiate the spacecraft. Save it. Double check my crew. We don't want to accidentally send a scientist or engineer on these early missions. And basically the reason for that is they do not provide the SAS option. And we'll get into what the SAS does more precisely as we launch here. But they don't have it, so if you just send them, you will not have the SAS option at the start here. Later in the game, you'll get automatic SAS options, which will allow you to take them, or you'll get multiple crew command pods, and then you can take more people. So we'll just take Jebediah. So here we are on the launch pad. I can't recall if Northernlion did it, but there is science to be gathered on the launch pad. I've already gathered it in this playthrough, but what you can do is you can launch a spacecraft to the pad here, just gather all this science, and then take it back home. And without even launching the spacecraft, you just recover the vessel after you gather all the science on the launch pad, and that's some free science for you. So here we are. But the only thing I don't really know about with this spacecraft is if I was too aggressive with or not aggressive enough with toning down the engine thrust here. So we're going to experiment on that. And the last thing we should clarify, or Northernlion, SAS, all it does is it locks you into the position that you're pointing on your navigation ball. And the way to look at the navigation ball here is if we press W, our spacecraft will actually wiggle just a tiny bit here. Or if we press D, we will sort of turn over to this direction. If we press A, we're going to tilt a little bit to this direction. If we press W, we're going to go this direction. And if we press S, we're going to tilt this direction. That's basically how it works. I mean, I can explain it a lot more complicated, but it's gonna get hard to explain. But that's basically how it works. If you keep your orientation with your craft as you're moving around, you should be able to keep following those kind of tips to know where you're going. Additionally, if you press E and Q, you can roll the spacecraft side to side, which could come in handy. So right now with SAS on, all it's going to do is just hold us going in a straight direction. It doesn't do any kind of auto navigation. It doesn't do anything by itself other than hold you in the direction you're pointing. I gotta accelerate to maximum thrust. This is an SRB though, so it's not going to do anything. I just want it ready for when we reach our next stage, so that it's ready to go when we fire that one up. And let's launch. Okay, so it's actually too aggressive with turning down the thrust limiter here. The engine is not going fast enough. That's okay. Usually, even if you do make this mistake where you're not quite going fast enough at the start, as you get higher, that'll kind of level out and it'll start going at a decent pace. So at the start, you do want to kind of go straight up, but as soon as you feel comfortable with it, you want to start pressing the D key to start turning to the east direction here. This is called a gravity turn or a gravity assist, but as I've said, we have these fins that are fixed in place, and this is where they kind of come back to bite you. I cannot turn in that direction because I'm kind of stuck going up right now. So you notice there's not any like atmospheric effects going on with the ship. That's usually a good thing. Usually when those are showing up, that means you're going too fast. If you're going too fast, you're wasting fuel. Alright, so we'll fire to the next stage. This stage has more control. Oh shit. Don't panic. It's recoverable. There we go. Oh, jeez. Okay. It's recovered. So basically what I did there was I just tried to get the ship pointed back into this eastward, or vertical eastwardish kind of direction. Now this thing's probably not going to make a full orbit because now we're going too fast, see? As you get higher, it gets easier to just end up going too fast. And what we should do as we're getting higher up here is we should cut the throttle on our engine and take a look at our map. We're actually above the atmosphere because the atmosphere stops at 70,000 meters here. So we can actually go back and just kind of coast up to the top. We might lose a little bit of our height here. We're just going to save the rest of our fuel until we're into space. And basically, anytime you're launching a spacecraft, you want to see if you're going to get to space. And as soon as you're in space with your apoaps, you want to save whatever fuel you have left till you're there, because you get a lot more fuel efficiency in space because you're not fighting the atmosphere. Most engines run more efficiently in space. And that'll help out tremendously. So I still have like a third of a tank here, and we're about to be up to our apoaps. I might not wait completely till the apoaps just because we're not going to be there for very long. We're going to need a little bit of time, so I'm just going to start burning as close as I can to this eastward horizon here. And we're just going to go as far as we can. Taking it, stay right on the eastward horizon will give you the most distance for your fuel. Now I have this very low angled orbit. This is a lot safer than going straight up and straight down. It gives you a lot more time to bleed off your speed. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the spacecraft to face the other way. I'm just going to press the A key. So this marker here, this green marker with the circle, that is the direction our ship is moving right now. And this is just another indicator to tell you, like, this is the perpendicular from that. And then over here, one of the most important icons in the game, this is our retrograde marker. This is the opposite direction of where we're going. So if you're trying to slow down, you want to move yourself to point to this. And then if you have any fuel to burn and you're trying to slow down, if you burn in this direction, you will slow down. So we're just going to eject our bottom stage down there into that direction. So now we have just our space pod, But science modules, I've already gathered everything though, so there's nothing to get here really. 2 points there. There's nothing left here. Don't have to worry about that. So now we're just going to worry about re-entry. So re-entry, again, we just want to stick to our retrograde marker. That's all we want to do. The SAS, may need it, may not need it. Sometimes the pod is it's okay on its own and you don't need the SAS to come down. It'll just kind of stay stable. Other times, depending on what little attachments you've put on it, you may need it. So if you find your controls, like right now our spacecraft is like extremely responsive and it's kind of hard actually to control. You can press the caps lock key and now you have fine controls, which kind of let you move your cursor a little bit less aggressively. So I'm going to switch it to fine controls for the descent here. So the other thing that's important with your descent is to not accelerate time. I know it's very tempting. You want to go faster, got a show to do. But when you're in the atmosphere, the time warp is a physics time warp. It's not just a time warp like a regular time warp. What it'll do is every kind of effect, every kind of movement you're making, any kind of physics that's being rendered on the spacecraft, you're multiplying it. Multiplying it 2 times, multiplying it 3 times, multiplying it 4 times. So if you switch it over to 4 times, you're hitting the atmosphere at 4 times the speed, 4 times the gravity, 4 times the mass. It can get bad. So all we're going to do, again, you could maybe turn off your SAS to see if the craft's going to work on its own. It's not going to do it though. I just saw it was going to kind of fall off. So we're just going to manually control it, and what we're going to do is we're just going to try to keep our little yellow diamond here centered in the center of our retrograde marker. Some of our parts might get hot, but they shouldn't blow up with this kind of approach angle. This is a very shallow angle. It should give us plenty of time to slow down. But if you're accelerating time, it might get worse. We might want to roll our craft. We can use A or Q to do that. Like maybe if we came in like this, it'd be a little bit safer for our science experiments there. And there we go. We're out of the danger zone now. The highway to the danger zone. Now we're having a more gentle descent. At this point, you could probably turn time acceleration to like 2. Just once you're out of the danger zone, then you don't really have to worry about the time acceleration quite as much. But I'm not going to tempt fate. Now it says we can deploy our parachute, so I'm just going to press spacebar. So you can deploy your parachute at any time once it's not red over here. And the parachute actually deploys in 2 stages. The first stage is this kind of deflated stage, and this will just kind of give you a gentle slowdown. So you want to kind of do that as soon as it's safe to do so. And then it'll fully deploy at that setting that you changed here. That tells you when it's going to fully deploy. That's a more aggressive slowdown. So now you see SAS is off and the craft's not really spinning out of the controller or anything. Turn it back on is going to kind of lock itself in this position even though it kind of wants to pull upwards. Doesn't matter. I usually turn it off because it uses power to use the SAS. Unless you have solar panels, you're not generating any power. So now that we have the parachute deployed, we can kind of tell it to accelerate just a little bit, but we want to slow down before we get to that 1000 mark, because that's when we hit the, you saw the G-forces jump there when the parachute deployed. If you have the time acceleration going up, then that's 4 times the acceleration. But now once this is fully deployed, then it's safe to just go as fast as you want until you get very close to the surface, because again, if you touch the surface with 4 times speed on, what that actually means is you're hitting it at 4 times the speed, basically. So I just kind of slow down here at like 50 meters. And we'll just gently plop down. Flash. So that's about all there is to it, to like basic flight and recovery and how to do it safely. I'll leave everything else up to you. I hope you all enjoyed and have a good day.